Do you want to use LinkedIn to promote your webinars, but you can't figure out how to get that information into HubSpot? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to sync the two together.
Welcome to HubSpot Hacks, where we help you get more out of HubSpot.
Webinars are a very powerful marketing tool, but getting people to attend can be a challenge when you don't have an audience or a database to start with. That's where the beauty of LinkedIn events come in. You can set up an event on LinkedIn as a webinar, and actually the way you set it up, you can sync it with HubSpot using Zapier, and then the people who register on LinkedIn can get zapped over to your HubSpot portal. Let's dive in. So first of all, we need to have a webinar set up in Zoom webinars. So we actually set up a webinar here as a dummy, and we're going to use that first to make sure that we've got all of these things set. So secondly, we're going to go to our company page. So to actually set up a webinar on LinkedIn, you have to have a company page. So start here, and if you scroll down the right-hand side, we've got manage and we've got events here. So if you click on this plus icon next to events, we're going to click on this event. So we're not going to add a cover image for the moment. Looks like it actually makes us cover. No, it doesn't. I thought if it made us have one, I would make one up on the fly. But we're going to select that it is an external event link. So we're not going to cover a LinkedIn event live here in this video, but this is for most companies who are doing a webinar when it's set at a specific time. This is going to be the method that you're going to use. So we're going to take the name of the webinar that we had here over in Zoom, copy that over to the page, and then we're going to say it's at this time, yes. We're going to select the time that it's actually at, which is going to be 12 p.m. on the 10th. And then we have this external event link. Now, this is where if you want to actually capture the leads on LinkedIn, so think about this. I talk to a lot of clients about the fact that now we're in an age where marketing is as much about capturing leads as it is about making it easy for the people we're trying to reach. So you have two options. One is going to be send them directly to the Zoom link, which one requires them to leave the LinkedIn interface and then having to open a Zoom window. So it's just it's a lot more clicks. It's actually more effort, and think in our culture, most of us are like, that's going to require too much. Now, on the other hand, LinkedIn events are designed so that we can invite people to them, and when they click on attend, it can actually use their information from LinkedIn through a lead capture form right inside of LinkedIn. It's really just 2 clicks. So that is the method we're going to demonstrate here in the video. The drawback is you tend to get personal information because most of us sign up for LinkedIn with our personal email address. But I'm going to say that I would much rather have this than using the Zoom link, because testing both, I'll tell you that you get a lot more interest when you do this method. So let's keep going. So we're not going to add an external event link. We're actually going to make this a LinkedIn registration form. And here we do need to use a privacy policy. So I'm going to add that in a little bit later here. We're going to have a description, and that's going to be the description of the webinar. Again, let's assume we have a description for this test webinar. We're just going to say, get the most out of HubSpot, tips behind the portal. And then here's where you can add speakers, and the speakers are supposed to be obviously the people on the webinar. And the beauty is if I invited my coworker Tyler and I would both be speakers, and we'd both have the opportunity to invite our networks to the event. And this is where the beauty of LinkedIn comes in, because it is a person-driven platform and people tend to like to be invited by people. So I'm going to go ahead and just list myself for now, because I don't want Tyler to get this random message as we're creating this video. So it looks like I do need a privacy policy. Let's go ahead and add that and go. Okay, so since we don't have a graphic, that's not going to show up here. If we had a graphic, it would show up here. It's telling me as Simple Strat that I need to create a post that promotes the webinar. I'm actually, we're just going to say, join us for an upcoming webinar. Perfect. Okay, so that means I've now got my successful webinar. Perfect. All right, so I'm not going to invite people just yet. I'm actually going to refresh this. And if you look at, we're going to click on the refresh button. In my news feed, I've got that we have this upcoming webinar right now. And then now on the right-hand side, I've also got these events over here. All right, now we need to make the zap over in Zapier that tells the system to take the registrant information from people on LinkedIn and move it over into HubSpot. But before this is actually going to work, we do need to have at least one person registered for the LinkedIn event in order for us to actually have test information in Zapier. So I do have someone who has registered, so we're going to go ahead and make this zap. So we're going to start with telling Zapier what app we want to start with. So we're going to go to LinkedIn lead forms, and we have an event. New event registration response is what we want. And we'll click on continue. And then what account do we want? We're going to go to, we're actually going to create a new account just to make sure it's the right one. There we go. Okay, we're going to click continue. And then the trigger that we want is the page simple strat. Perfect. And then the event that we want is the one that we just saw, getting the most out of HubSpot here, and continue. Perfect. Okay, so we've got this. We're going to test the trigger. Is it connected? And it is. Perfect. All right. So then we're going to continue. And what do we want to do next? We want to actually create a HubSpot record. So we're going to click on create or update a contact. Perfect. That's what we want. Click on continue. And what account do we want? We want simple strat. And what we actually want is our ID. So let's get that. We are 194. There we go. Perfect. And continue. Okay, so we're gonna have some things here. That looks good. Contact data. Now what we need to do is we basically need to find the information from LinkedIn and tell it which fields it needs to go into HubSpot. So before we do that though, you're gonna see if I click on show all options, we've got all this information that is coming over from LinkedIn. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna look for this form URL and a form ID. Okay, this is actually what I want. So this form ID, there isn't a way to copy this, at least not that I know of. Nope, if I click on it, okay. That didn't work. All right, so let's go back because that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I'm gonna actually screenshot this form ID because this is what I want, and I'm gonna create this over in HubSpot. So basically we're gonna go into fields and we're gonna create a new field. So we haven't done this before in our portal, we've done it for other clients, but we're gonna create a unique property ID called LinkedIn Lead Capture ID. So we're gonna do that over in the contact record, which means I need to go to users and teams. Actually, nope, I need to go to objects and contacts. Drive around enough in here and things move on you. All right, so we're gonna go to contacts and we're going to go to manage contact properties. And right now we've got contact properties here, and I'm going to make sure there isn't already one in here. Company LinkedIn, bio connections, ID, this isn't the same thing. Okay, so always when you go to add a property, especially if you have admin privileges, make sure that it's not already in there. So I'm gonna create a property. We're gonna select, I'm not gonna put it under a group for the sake of demonstration. We're just gonna call this LinkedIn Lead Event Capture ID. Perfect. And then ID from LinkedIn event. Oh, it looks like I have to select a group. All right, we're gonna put it under conversion information. Okay, field type. So in this case, if we do multiple LinkedIn events down the road, we're going to want to add additional fields to this. So it can't be a single numeric field. We want it to be a pick list because people can attend multiple LinkedIn events. So here we're going to have either multiple checkboxes or radio select. We're going to go multiple checkboxes because we want to be able to select multiple at once. So for this purpose, we're going to bring up that screenshot and we're going to show that here. Okay, so I've got this inside of the property. We're going to click on create. And there we go. Okay, so now we've got this LinkedIn Lead Event Capture ID. So I'm going to go back to the Zap. And actually, before we go any further, I'm going to name this bad boy. Let's go LinkedIn Lead Event to HubSpot Contact. Always want to be pretty prescriptive with my Zap so I know what's going on. All right, so we're going to tell the system what fields we want to take from LinkedIn and port them over to HubSpot. So contact email is going to be the email here. And we're going to go, there's a lot of stuff that shows up based on what's in your HubSpot portal. So I'm going to use Control F to find the first name. Perfect. We're going to go first name here. Control F to find the last name. It's not in the order that I want it to be, which kind of stinks. And then we're going to find that ID. So yeah, depending on how many fields you have, this is kind of a like super annoying workaround, but for now, we're just going to embrace it. I'm going to click on refresh fields. Because when I refresh fields, I'm looking for that ID that I just made in HubSpot and I want it to show up here in Zapier. So let's go ahead and find it again. Here we go. All right, so that capture ID that I was just talking about, we're going to find that here. Again, the only ID that I put in is right here, so it's the only one that I want. If you're doing this after doing multiple events, you will have multiple IDs. So it's important to probably keep a spreadsheet of all of your IDs so you've got that information in one place, because it's super confusing. But we're going to go back and add first name here. We've got first name. Perfect. Let's go last name. That's good. Let's go email. Okay, perfect. And let's do company. Okay, company name is here. And we're going to find that by showing all options. Let's see here, her company here. And then we're looking for job title. Those are the ones you probably want to pull over. Again, if you don't have nearly as many fields as we have, this probably won't take you as long. There we go. All right, that was a stretch. Now let's go down to the very bottom. We're going to click continue, and we're going to test and continue. Okay, so a contact was sent to HubSpot 2 seconds ago. So we're going to go ahead and check that contact. So let's go back to here, contacts. And do we have a Brandy? Let's go here. Okay, we do. So this was the email that came through just now. And we've got, so she was already in the system. So what I'm going to do is actually show you how this works, because it actually did go through just fine. So we're going to click on publish. Okay, looks good. So we've got all the details of our setup here, and then we're already managing all of this. So what we want to do is we want to also then set up in HubSpot for them to get enrolled into that webinar sequence. Webinar workflow. If you haven't watched our video about how to sync HubSpot and Zoom, this is the part where we want to go back and do that, because the rest of the workflow that we're going to set up after this point is part of that training video. But here, what we're going to do is basically go to HubSpot and tell HubSpot if a contact came in and had this ID, we're going to take them and enroll them in that specific workflow for that webinar. So the key thing to keep in mind is you do need to have a workflow set up that actually syncs HubSpot and Zoom together if you are also using your LinkedIn to manage these invites and then sync them over. So I'm going to go back to HubSpot. We're going to go to this workflow here. And right now I've got a webinar workflow that basically, if someone fills out a form on the landing page, they get enrolled in this Zoom webinar. So because this workflow is set up, this is the trigger. You can also manually enroll people in a workflow. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a workflow, a new one, that says anybody who has that contact ID that I just talked about, and the only way they're going to have that contact ID is if they went through the process of registering over on LinkedIn for this specific event. So now we're going to go back to HubSpot and basically tell HubSpot to use that ID that came from the registration to enroll that particular contact into a workflow. So let's go back to HubSpot, and we're going to go to that specific property we just set up. We're going to copy over that number so that we have it for what we're setting up here. So we're going to click on contact properties. We're going to look for that ID and lead capture ID right here. Click on edit, and we're going to copy this here. All right. So we're going to go to automation and workflows. And then our trigger is going to be actually anybody who has that ID. So we'll name our workflow here in a second. We're going to set up our triggers as the contact properties, LinkedIn lead capture ID is this one here. I'm going to click on apply filter. So basically anytime that person who gets ported over from HubSpot because of this LinkedIn capture ID, we're going to enroll them in another workflow. And we've got this workflow here that is for the webinar. And if you haven't yet watched our other video about how to set up a webinar for Zoom and HubSpot together, this is where you probably need to do that, because you do need to have Zoom and HubSpot sync together so that when you enroll them in this next workflow, I'll show you here in a second, it actually then sends them a confirmation email, gets them sent over to Zoom, and then everything there is set up. So we're going to click on save. And here we're just going to call this webinar LinkedIn lead sync. And then we'll say test, since this is all a test. And then this is basically our settings here. Anytime campaign, this is HubSpot Hacks. You probably do want to think about whether or not, so if someone actually registers on LinkedIn and they register on your landing page, if LinkedIn is linked to their personal email and their landing page registration is on their company, it will have two separate contacts unless you have both of their emails in their contact record. So you might need to merge duplicates at some point. So just kind of like heads up about that, since LinkedIn tends to have people's personal emails in there instead. So we're going to go, it executes anytime, goals, changes, and then we're going to click review and publish. Right now we've got one contact who fits that criteria, which would be the contact we just saw that actually registered for the webinar that we tested over here in our Zaps when we set it up. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, we're going to enroll them, and we're going to turn this on, and there we go. So basically I'm enrolling that contact in this workflow. And then once that happens, I should be able to enroll, they should auto enroll in this webinar workflow here. So this is the other workflow we set up in that other video where basically we get added to a Zoom webinar automatically. We then send them a follow-up confirmation email, and then your team gets notified. So that's basically all it is. We're going to go back to one more reporting here just to see if that's working okay for us. And changes, turn on the workflow, perfect. All users, we're going to go back, and then we're going to create a list of anybody that came from LinkedIn and registered through that ID. So basically we're going to say webinar registrants from LinkedIn, and next. And then our criteria here is going to be anybody who contact properties is LinkedIn lead capture ID, and it's going to be this one here. Perfect. We're going to save that list. And then it'll take a little bit of time to capture or to present here, but basically that's going to show you anybody then who came through from LinkedIn. So if you go back to LinkedIn and you actually look at that event, if you invited anybody, they're going to be here. But if I go back to the event itself and I click down here on HubSpot Sales and Marketing, let's see, show all events, this one, perfect. Okay, now I've got myself and 2 other attendees that are attending our event. And if I don't believe that our Zap was on when Liz registered, but if it was, I would actually then have her in this portal here as well. So that is how to do it. If you wanted to actually have more people get to your event, as the administrator, all you have to do is click on invite. And again, the really great thing about this is you do have the chance to invite literally your whole LinkedIn network if you want to. I'd advise against that. But if you do, it makes it easy to then use LinkedIn as a powerful webinar promoter, bring it into Zapier, and then zap that information over into HubSpot to continue to build your influence and awareness as a company. So that's it. More tips and tricks. Hit that subscribe button and let me know if there's any topics you want to hear about in future videos. We'll see you next week.